This might be one of the biggest pieces of junk I've ever picked up. So this is a 2014 Polaris RZR800. So the seller stated that he bought this from a young kid who blew it up and then let it sit in the field for a couple of years. So he brought it back home. He actually rebuilt the whole engine, he said, with all Polaris parts. He bought a brand new wiring harness for it, new crank, new pistons, new cylinder, new stator, new CDI. He said everything pretty much brand new. Got it all back together and it still wouldn't run right. Let's see. Oh yeah, it's milky. Yeah. Ooh, that does not sound good. Some plastic getting ripped up right here. Oh, that's interesting. That's actually scraping on that cover. Belt off of here. So that's why that was rubbing. Alright, well, we fixed that problem. Alright, so we have coolant mixing with oil. And it's most likely going to be that water pump seal we're working with underneath here. It won't seal properly. No. With the oil pump here, you can see there's a couple bigger gouges there. So you guys can see how smooth that one is. That's what it's supposed to look like. That there's actually a hole right here in this little case half. And that is for the weep hole. So the weep hole is going through. That's supposed to not have a hole there. And that's supposed to go directly to the back side of that seal. Right now, it's just spraying oil out from here, because this is where the oil is. Alright, we're back with the 2014 Polaris RZR800. If you guys watched the last video, you know I picked this thing up for $2,000, and I kind of regret it. This one is very, very rough. But we dug into it last video, and we found that the clutch was rubbing pretty bad on the side cover. We ended up fixing that. It was just a stripped out screw. Then we moved on to the water pump issue. Coolant was mixing with the oil and turning it really milky. So we figured that the seal was bad on the water pump. We replaced the seal. It was still doing the same thing. So we actually figured that the shaft on the oil pump that runs the water pump was bad. So in order to take that out, we had to take out the whole engine. And we've got the engine on the bench over here. We actually replaced the whole oil pump with a new oil pump, because the shaft is actually connected to the oil pump. So here's the new one. The old one had a bunch of pitting and gouges in it. It looks like somebody tried to take a screwdriver and get the old seal off. So I don't think the seal was sealing properly on that shaft. As we were putting on the cover, we found a major issue. So there was actually a hole right here. Somebody had tried to tap out the weep hole here, and it came through the case cover, and there's a big hole. So this cover sits where oil is. So oil was coming up through that hole, going down behind the seal and mixing with that coolant, and then vice versa. The coolant was coming in through there and mixing with the oil, and that was blowing out that hole. So we actually took some JB Weld, let that cure for 2 days, and then took some gasket maker and then covered the JB Weld. The gasket maker is resistant to everything: oil, gas, coolant. So that should hold up pretty good. So what we're gonna do today is put everything back together, get this engine back in the frame, start it up, and hopefully that fixes our coolant issue where it mixes with the oil. But we have a ton of work to do. We've gotta get this engine back in here, get everything hooked up, and then get this whole machine basically reassembled in one day. So let's get going on it, and hopefully we can take this one for the first ride. We were also having some issues with the transmission, so we're gonna try looking at that today as well. All right, so this cover goes back on. We're gonna grease up the seals. Pack that full. The repair is right there, so that hopefully sits right in there and doesn't cause any issues. Hopefully that doesn't rub on that gear. It's kind of the goal. So, just making sure everything looks good here. Rubber mallet. Let's see, this goes on like that. There's a washer on the outside of it. Goes right in there like that. And your flywheel can go on. Make sure that woodruff key is lined up. And washer goes on. Nut goes on. And we can torque that down. All right, now the water pump, it's gonna have this little washer right here. A little grease packed on there, but there's little ridges here. It's gonna line up with the little notches on the impeller. So that side faces out, that little porcelain side faces down. This can go right over here like this. And then this goes right here. And then you've got your nut. Now you want to tighten this down until you just see the threads come through on the nut. See if that rotates smooth. That looks good. Alright, this is a brand new cover going on with a brand new gasket seal here. So This goes on just like this. Alright, engine is all ready to be put back into the machine here. So before we do that, I want to quick check the shift sensor here. So right here is the shift position sensor. And it seems like that's not working. Because you turn the machine on and it shows lines on the dash. I'll quick show you guys. Alright, you can see the dotted lines there. When you shift into gear, it sometimes goes into gear. There's neutral. For a brief second, it comes back out. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. So I don't know if it's something in the transmission or the actual sensor. There's neutral again. There's reverse. There's park. But see, it sometimes does and sometimes doesn't. See if we can pry this out. There we go. Now what happens is these pins contact the pin right there. That's on a little spring. And as that hits, it signals the gauge up there which gear it's in. So we can clean up these contacts here. So maybe we're not getting a good contact. And there's that little pin in there as well. We can take out, clean that up. Oop, something just flew out of there. Alright, let's clean these up a little bit. Alright, we went ahead and cleaned up the connectors here and then the little pins. Now what we're going to do is take a wire that's stripped off on both ends and touch this connector right in the middle with the outside connectors. And as you connect that middle one with the outside one, you should see either low, high, neutral, reverse pop up on the gauge up here. Alright, we're going to do middle for this outside one. Let's see what we get. Not getting anything there. So I think it is a sensor. Oh, there's low. There's neutral. There's reverse. And that should be high and park. So we're not getting anything in higher park. So that tells me that the actual shift position sensor is bad. So it's not the transmission. Well, now high is miraculously working. It's actually working a lot better. Now there's low. There's neutral. Park is working now. Interesting. So yeah, we just need a new sensor. I think it's getting too worn down. But most of them are working. That's good. Low and high are the main ones, and the neutral is too. So that's working a lot better than it was. All right, engine is officially in. Now we just have to bolt everything back up, everything back on, and then test this thing out. Hopefully it's fixed. All right, we've got the engine mounted, bolted down. We've got the intake on. We've got the injectors on and the pipe on. I think that's as far as we're gonna take it until we know that the water pump seal is not leaking anymore. So let's get some oil in it and we'll see if it leaks. All right, this thing takes 1.9 quarts of oil. We're just gonna put 2 in there. All right, now what we're gonna do is start this thing up, and we're gonna look right here where that weep hole is, and if any oil comes out of there, we know that that seal isn't holding up or that repair isn't holding up that we did to the case. If nothing comes out, we're good to go. We don't have any coolant in it right now, so we're gonna have to see if the mechanical seal works as well. That's what keeps the coolant out of that area. So if we put coolant in and we see coolant coming out of that hole, the mechanical seal is failing, which we can replace without taking the engine out. But first things first, let's see if that oil seal is working. All right, here we go. Nothing yet. I hear something squeaking though. I don't know what that would be. We're gonna fire this thing back up and we're taking a look right here and right in here. We don't want to see any oil coming from anywhere. Looks pretty good. Yeah, the squeaking is just the breather out of the valve cover here. So good thing it wasn't the engine bearings. But we're not seeing any oil out of there at all. So oil seal is holding up good. We're gonna put the cover back on, get some coolant in, and then we're gonna see if coolant weeps out of this hole. So if coolant weeps out of that hole, we know that coolant is getting by the seal, the mechanical seal here. Get a little coolant going in here. Bleed screw is going to be right down here. So you can see it's got a notch for a flathead screwdriver. So it's right below the fuel line here coming in to the head. So we're going to take that off here quick. I don't think it's ever been taken off before. Oh man, that's on there. She's stripped out, really? There we go. She came. Didn't want to, but she did. Lots of air coming out. Guys, hear that air coming out? Alright, we're going to take that off, and we're going to pour more coolant in until we see coolant coming out of there. See, it's pouring out. Get the screw back in. Tighten that down. All right, then we'll top off the coolant. All right, let's run it and see if coolant comes out of that weep hole. Looks pretty good. Nothing coming out, so mechanical seal should be good. Let this run for a little bit. I think we're good. Well, we have absolutely zero leaking at the weep hole here. So I think we fixed our problem. Only time will tell. So we'll get everything back together on here, and then we'll start piecing this thing back together. We've got one door on, the other one needs to be bolted up. Actually, this one does too. Looks like falling off. So all these doors need to be bolted on. The seats need to be bolted on. Clutch needs to go back on. Air filter, everything has to go back on. So we'll quick do that and then attempt to ride this thing. All right, time to get the bed on. I think this piece goes right here. Alright, so usually to get these seats on to latch, there's a thing that's coming up through the floorboard, and you pull that and it releases it and it attaches like that. We are missing the piece that goes down into here. So usually there's a piece that comes up through here, attaches like that, and then it connects onto a seat, but we don't have that. So what we're gonna do is try to take this apart, put a bolt through it, a long bolt like this, that goes through that hole, and we can tighten that down. So if we put that'll stick through that hole and we can tighten it up. Alright, this seat is bolted down, nice and tight, not going anywhere. Let's go do the driver's seat. Alright, we ended up going a different direction with things, so we took a bolt, mounted it to there. This is the same diameter as what goes into that hole. Now when you put this down, you can see it'll come up and latch in. There we go. So seat is latched in. We did that with both of them. So both seats are good to go now. And they can be removed easily. So that looks pretty good. All right, time to get this hard door on. The other one we got working good. I'll show you guys it's opening and closing now. Working great. That comes out like that. That's in place. Now this has to mount down in there. We might have to cut that piece off. Let's see. How did this one go? We were able to mount that one without bending that out too much, it looks like. Alright, we got that to go. Get that bolted down here. Now, close our seat here. Alright, both doors are latching. Cool. Alright, let's install the mirrors the seller included. This is what they look like. So, this clamp goes on here, like that. And this gets clamped to it. And then bolted in. So that mirror's on there. Can rotate that. This piece, loosen that up a little bit. This piece can go on like that. And that clamp piece. Come on. There we go. This goes on there like that. Alright, seller also included a mirror for this thing, so we're going to install that up there. Alright, mirrors installed. Looking pretty good. Alright, let's take out the battery, get a new one. So we are going to mark all the wires going in with a marker. So we know all the positive, because not all of them are red going in. So pink, pink. Negatives going in. Get to. Oh, that's a big battery. So, let's go buy another battery for it. Alright, brand new battery. This thing costs 170 bucks. What the heck? Battery prices are crazy. Alright. new bolts here. Get that in there. Is that all of them? I think that might be all of them. Alright, see if this thing turns on. Yep. Cool. Looks like engine light is on right there though. Alright, let's check this rear diff fluid. See if there's anything in there. Oh yeah, pouring out. So that's at the right level, right to the thread marks. So that looks good. Just wanted to make sure there was some in there before we attempt to ride this thing. All right, this thing is all ready for the first test drive. What we're gonna do is start this thing up, let it run for a little bit, keep an eye on that temperature, and see if the cooling system's working. I wanna check the hoses and stuff like that before we take it for the first real ride here. But we'll start it up and let it run for a bit here. All right, engine light went off. That's good. Tail light's out right there. Need a new bulb for that. Let's see what we've got. There's the temp right there. We'll keep an eye on that. Engine sounds good though. No more squeaking. Well, who thinks it's gonna move here? I really hope that transmission's fine. That would suck if it wasn't. All right, we're gonna let this run for a bit. All right, temp is at 118, climbing a little bit. Let's just try to take it for the first test drive, see what happens. It's running pretty good. 186. That's not too bad. Nothing's in the leaf hole. Yeah, that's fixed. Yep, both cooling lines are nice and warm. That's good. I don't see the fan coming on though. That should be coming on. Staying at 186. That's good. Not too bad. Goes full speed. I don't hear the fan turning on. We're waiting for that fan to kick on. Is it even plugged in? Yeah, she's plugged in. So maybe the thermostat, I believe, is over here. I don't see one. 199. Once it hits 200, we're probably going to turn it off. There's 201, yeah. Let's see if the fan kicks on. I don't know what that button's for right here, but nothing's turning on here. So we've got a problem with the fan. All right, so I just looked on the forums, and a lot of people said that their fan doesn't kick on until like 204 or 208. So we might have to let this thing warm up to 208 and see if it kicks on. So let's let this idle for a little bit. We're at 165 now. All right, we're at 201, 203. Should come on at 204 here. Nothing. We're gonna wait until it hits 208. We're at 204. Oh, fan came on. Awesome. That is working. Awesome. Well, that's good. So fan does work. Came on at 204. Let's see if it cools it down. See if it drops here. Yep, there we go. Fan's working. Cool. On. $195. See what temp it just turned off. 194. So it turns on at 204, turns off at 194. It's working great. So fan does work. That makes me feel a lot better. I really can't believe how good this thing's running. Wow. Shifts through all the gears smooth, goes full speed, probably goes about 55 miles an hour top speed. And suspension feels good, everything is working perfect. So for $2,000, we got a crazy good deal here. I mean, where can you find a Polaris RZR800 for $2,000? Nowhere. Tires are good on it. We didn't see any coolant coming out of the wheat pole. We'll have to check the oil when we get home, but not a single drop of coolant or oil coming out of there. Nothing's overheating. Fans working. I mean, so far so good. Alright, she's all cleaned up now. It looks a lot better. Inside was really dirty too. Got that pretty clean. So everything's looking pretty good. Well, first ride on this thing went great. The shift position sensor is now working somehow. So it goes through every single gear and shows up on the dash. So that was really awesome. We were periodically checking the wheat pole here, and not a single drop of coolant or oil coming out of that thing. So we are good there. We're gonna quick check the oil and make sure that's not milky, just to make sure there's no coolant going in the engine. All right, to get to the oil, that seat had to come off, and then just that panel in the back here had to come off. Oh, moment of truth here. Is it milky? Really, really clear. Look at that. So, our new water pump seals and our new oil pump fixed our issue. Look how clear that is. Perfect. Well, this one's all fixed up. Turned out to be a pretty nice machine. I was definitely skeptical when we first bought this thing for $2,000. I thought I made a huge mistake because the condition it was in was just awful. I mean, this thing looked horrible, all torn apart. I thought for sure it was gonna have to have engine work done, hearing that squealing noise, but it turned out to be the clutch, which we fixed. And then, you know, the water pump issue wasn't that big of a deal. The only big bummer was that we had to take out the whole engine to get to that oil pump. So, luckily, it was an easy fix. We got the engine back in, she fired right back up. And we are really lucky that it goes through all the gears and the transmission is fine. I was a little bit worried about that as well. But yeah, everything else works great. The brakes work, transmission feels good, suspension feels good. I mean, it's a pretty rock solid machine right now. I rode this thing hard today, really tested it out. It didn't overheat at all. You know, sounded really good. So, you know, I'm calling this one pretty much done. We're gonna order up the shim kit for the clutch, a couple light bulbs for it, and this one will be good to go. So hopefully you guys enjoyed picking this one up for $2,000. Kind of taking a big risk on it, you know, picking it up for $2,000 in the condition it was in, and then diagnosing it, getting it running, and then getting the engine out, getting it back in after the fix, and then taking it for the first ride. It's definitely satisfying after you get done working on these things to take it for the first ride and actually enjoy it. I mean, working on them is kind of a pain in the butt, but you know, the reward is pretty good. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay tuned for next video. And until next time, we are out.